All right, y'all. Well, welcome back to our third session for our fourth class for our new member class online. Today, we will be talking about all things polity. And so the United Methodist Church has a very unique structure, and how we operate not only at the local church level, but beyond the conference and beyond is quite unique. And Bruce is an expert, I will say, from my perspective, an absolute expert in UMC polity, and as a former bishop, has a lot of insight as to how our structure operates, both on paper and out in the world. So Bruce is gonna kick us off.
Okay, the first thing I would like to do is to address the issue of John Wesley in front of us. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to polity, it's not John Wesley, okay? Wesley, as we talked about last night, he died an Anglican priest, and the polity we have is not Anglican. It is Methodist, and therefore very U.S. oriented, if you will. Now, I've tried to plan this to keep it simple, stupid, and I'm going to try. There's three things that I want to cover today, and there's a lot of stuff under it, but and therefore, if you get a headache and you've heard enough of the presentation and want to leave, that's okay. If you get these three things straight, okay? First of all, we're going to talk about politics and our understanding of the political, because that's a root word of polity. So, and politics is simply the art of getting things done. It's not good, it's not bad, it's an art of getting things done. That's what political means. So when we talk about polity, it's how we understand to get things done. So that's the first thing we'll cover. Then we'll cover the whole issue of authority in the church, which in the history of the church for 2,000 years is a crucial issue in terms of how Christians have organized to get things done. And we will talk about how we delegate authority rather than centralize authority. And that's another key concept. And finally, we'll talk about the fact that our polity is missional, that we are all sent to serve. So if you want to just jump back up to what I said about politics, it's the art of getting mission done for United Methodist. So if you will, just substitute the generic things and put mission. That's why we're organized the way we are, because we're sent to serve. So let's unpack these one at a time. First of all, politics. You've got to put that in the context of when the Methodist Church was born. It was a movement in England. It became a church in the United States 8 years after the colonies became the United States in 1776. So if you realize that the Methodist Church was born in America in 1784, 8 years after the United States was born in this same land, what else is new? That the Methodist Church reflected the organizational thinking of the United States Constitution. And the Constitution was adopted with basic understanding that there are three parts of our governance. We have the executive branch, which we know in secular politics is the president. He or she executes the laws that are passed by the legislative branch, which is in the United States is Congress, and in the United Methodist Church, it's the General Conference. Serves that congressional role of passing legislation that the executive branch executes. And finally, we have the judicial branch in the United States, the Supreme Court. We have the judicial branch in the United Methodist Church. It's called the Judicial Council. So basically, if something needs to be clarified in terms of whether or not it's constitutional, whether or not it's something that the executive branch does or the legislative branch does, the question is this constitutional? Who decides that? The Judicial Council, which in secular terms is the Supreme Court of the Church. And so it's very easy to understand our governance if you understand the United States Constitution, because we are a direct reflection. The same heads that put together the Constitution of the United States put together the Constitution of the Methodist Church, because in both cases, Tory had to go home. The English monarchy had to go home in terms of secular politics, and the Church of England had to go home in terms of the church. And so the Church of England went home. Whew, here we are, and we have our polity, a direct reflection, if you will, of the Constitution of the United States. Now, the other element of politics that I want to lift up is something that is sort of overlooked sometimes, because our part of getting things done, getting mission done, is in the form of a republic. Now, again, that's a reflection of the United States. In the United States, we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the democracy for which it stands. Nope. Not the democracy, to the republic for which it stands. So what is a republic? It is representative governance. Persons are elected to represent their constituency to make decisions. And all throughout the United Methodist Church, we are a republic. We elect persons to make decisions on behalf of the whole, whether or not it's the local church, the annual conference, or the general church. We're a republic. We believe in representative governance. And so in the last 6 months, 2 groups have made decisions that have affected all of us, the church council and the trustees. A total of, less than 20 people making decisions for Grace United Methodist Church. Maddie sent out a questionnaire to get all of our thoughts. But when it came right down to it, the church council made a decision and the trustees agreed or disagreed with that decision. A group of 20 people making a decision for the whole church? Yep, because we're a republic. We believe in representative governance. And a lot of people don't understand that the United States is not a democracy, essentially. We're a republic. And so are we as United Methodists. So I hope that sort of unpacks politically where we are. We're organized judicially, with the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch, and we're a republic, not a democracy, where everyone has a vote on everything. Okay, but the next section of the presentation has to do with authority. And Maddie mentioned this is how we're really unique, and We are. I've been privileged in my career. I've been a part of the General Conference, legislative branch, since 1972. Now, the United Methodist Church was born in 68. And so actually I was there in 70 at interim General Conference, but elected in 72. So I've been a part of 72, 76, 80, 84, and then 88, where I chaired the Rules Committee of the legislative branch of the church. So I really, for 20 years, was engrossed heavily in terms of how we get things done, in terms of the legislative side of the church. Then whoops, the church decided I should move to the executive side of the church. And as a bishop of the church, you would think, whoopsie, boy, that person has a lot of power and a lot of control. And I kid you not, that assumption is incorrect. There's two understandings of how you handle authority politically in the governance of any body. One of that is you centralize authority, and the other is that you delegate authority. Now, when you centralize authority, this is a hierarchy. This just simply means someone or an entity at the top actually has control over it all. Nothing really happens until this person says yes or allows somebody else to say yes. Now, the best illustration of a hierarchy in the church is, of course, the Roman Catholic Church. And the Roman Catholic Church has a pope at the top of the hierarchy. Nothing happens in the Roman Catholic Church unless the Pope says yes or allows somebody else to say yes. Now, we can be critical of that hierarchy in the Roman Catholic Church, but let's realize that the Western Church, the Roman Catholic Church, that we would have all been a part of if we would have been 15th century Christians, because that's all that existed. Where were they living? In political situations in the secular world was organized this way. Who was at the top? The king or the emperor. And that's the hierarchy. And a lot of persons assume that the United Methodist Church is a hierarchy because that's how they just think about organizations. And so they think that the bishop, lo and behold, is at the top and nothing can happen without the bishop saying yes or allowing somebody else to say yes. It's not the case. We look at the local church. The pastor is the top of the hierarchy if you think this way. Nothing can happen at Grace United Methodist Church unless Maddie says yes or allows somebody else to say yes. Not that way at all, is it, Maddie?
No.
Because we delegate authority. Now, it's wilder than a March hare when you look at it, because let's just use the illustration of a bishop in centralized authority. Here's the bishop representing a stick person, one person. So let's say I was in Dallas and had a great idea of something I need to do, but it was going to cost a few dollars. Well, now, hierarchy, no problem, just write a check, please. Not in the United Methodist Church. I had to go to the Council of Finance and Administration. They had final authority over the expenditure of funds, and they, and only they, could say yes or no for that present year. But for future years, it had to go to the annual conference for the annual conference to say to the Finance and Administration Committee, it's okay to spend the money in that way, and then the bishop can do what they thought was best for the area to do. Much more efficient, but this builds relationships. And the key to delegating authority is relationships are built. So when Maddie wants something to happen at Grace United Methodist Church, and we want the pastor to have suggestions, can she just go out and do it? Well, she can try, but if she needs a few bucks, oh gosh, she's got to go to the finance committee. And the finance committee has authority over the budget of the church, and but the budget of the church has to be approved by the church council. And you say, well, now that means two entities have to approve everything? Yeah, that's correct. Two entities have to approve anything that happens in our polity, regardless of what it is. And you say, boy, that takes time. Yes, but as it takes time, relationships are built and commitments are made. And so all of a sudden, if you go to the finance committee, there's 10 people. They go to the church council, lo and behold, there's 15 people. Then all of a sudden, Maddie has 25 people on board with the idea of what might be done. And that's true also with a layperson. If a layperson has a great idea, can that layperson just do that in the name of the church? No. They can do it as an individual. But when Shirley Boo, 12 years ago, had an idea about the Thursday night supper, did she just all of a sudden start it? No. She went to the church council with the idea, having talked to the pastor. Shirley talked to the pastor, went to the church council, and the church council affirmed the idea and said, great idea, let's go for it. All of a sudden, it wasn't Shirley, it was the church council with others now committed, and relationships are built because we delegate authority rather than centralize it. A key difference in the life of the United Methodist Church compared to most expressions of the church. And just to let you know that independent Protestant churches around the country, around our country, are almost all organized this way, that the pastor has the final say over everything. So in the hierarchy, one person is in control of everything. As we delegate authority, someone or some entity is in charge of everything. And so we still have authority delegated to get the job done. But the difference is, it might be a committee, it might be a person, it might be the pastor. That varies because authority is delegated, not centralized. Now I want to pause and say, Maddie, reflect on that as a pastor 2 years out of seminary.
Right. Well, a story came to mind actually, because this is a really helpful understanding of authority in the local church and beyond. And for me, one, it's been helpful to have a delegated reality because I've been here just over a year. And so at the end of the day, I don't have the relationships with the church members or the community members. And so to have other voices at the table required with any decision really has been incredibly helpful for me. The story that came to mind was actually last month's council decision regarding worship for the month of September. And so for the last 5-6 months, I have had a council meeting, we've talked, and then the council has recommended to trustees what should happen for the following month, and the trustees approve or not. Last month was the first month where the recommendation that went forth from council was not approved by trustees. And so in that process, there were many conversations, but the council recommended a partial reopening. trustees bounced it back saying, we invite you to reconsider this proposal from our vantage point of caring for the space of the church. And then the council had another conversation, offered another recommendation, and then the trustees approved that second recommendation. In that, I don't have a vote in any of those spaces. So at the end of the day, I had a voice, and my voice, which I think was something to lift up about our leadership, my voice mattered a lot. For me, I had my own perspective of what I felt was safest for me and for the congregation, and that voice carried a lot of the council and trustees' decision. But at the end of the day, when we were voting in both spaces, it was not my vote that made the determination one way or another. And so that to me felt really clarifying of the difference of our Methodist reality, where I, as the pastor, have voice, I have vision, I can do things, but not alone, not rogue. Like, it has to be in conversation and in relationship with other members of Grace UMC. So that's my reflection. It's helpful. It's a lot.
It's all about relationships, building relationships to get the job done. Now, the third piece of our look has to do with our polity is missional, in that everyone is sent to serve. Remember, the art of getting mission done is what we're talking about. And so in the United Methodist Church, we are a sent people. Now, let me base that on a biblical understanding. The Acts of the Apostles is the 5th book in the New Testament, the story of the early church. What does the word apostles mean? It means the sent ones. So it's the Acts of the sent ones. Paul traveled all around the Mediterranean area, spreading the good news of forgiveness and love and compassion. But he just didn't all of a sudden, after his conversion, say, I think this would be a good idea. I like to travel all around. No, if you read the Acts of the Apostles, Paul was sent to those communities to spread the word by the early church community. So as United Methodists, we believe the Acts of the Apostles is good enough for them, it's good enough for us. So we're the Acts of the sent ones. And how we send is really fascinating. Let's get practical about it. I was elected a bishop of the church in 1988 when I was expecting to retire 16 years later from Southwestern College. Obviously, we loved that relationship with Southwestern, but the church decided to elect me as a bishop of the church and send me to Dallas to be over the Dallas area of the United Methodist Church. I didn't say Dallas is where I want to live, because it wasn't. But the church decided that the situation of leadership in the Dallas area at that time, that I would be a good match for that area. So I didn't choose to go to Dallas. We were sent to Dallas to serve. Maddie is the pastor at Grace United Methodist Church in Winfield, Kansas. She didn't decide that Grace Church would be a whippy place to be the pastor. The church didn't decide, we found a person and we want her and to be our pastor. No, the cabinet of the annual conference had Grace Church needing a pastor because Laura was appointed elsewhere. She was sent elsewhere, and Maddie was in the pool to be appointed. And so they said, we think Maddie would be a good match for Grace, and Maddie was sent to Grace Church to serve. So if you will, a bishop is sent by the conference to serve an area. The bishop and the cabinet sends pastors to local churches to provide leadership for the local churches, and pastors are responsible of sending the laity into the world to serve. So if you will, every component of the United Methodist Church, Episcopal, bishops, pastors, and laity are all a part of a sent community into the world to serve. And that's the essence of our polity, that we're sent in mission into the world. So the business of the church is to join with God in God's mission of love in the world. Now, a lot could be said and shared about how we're organized in terms of the general conference, the annual conference, and the local church. Those are three general, the three levels of the church. I really don't want to get into that. What I want to be sure we understand is that our polity, we're organized to being sent to serve. We believe the best way to do that is to delegate authority, not to centralize it. And we believe that as a republic, we elect people to make decisions on our behalf. And in that package, I think you have the essence of what our polity is all about. Now, as one who was sent, the Grace, what's your reflection on the sentness?
Absolutely. So again, it's a unique kind of part of Methodism to be sent, and I'm grateful because this is my first exposure to being sent to serve, and I feel like this has been a really wonderful space for me to use my gifts and to meet the gifts of the church and the needs of the church and community. And so it's felt a very faithful and important process. And, I couldn't have picked Grace Winfield for myself. I didn't even know Winfield existed until I got given a call to come. And so I think a lot of times opportunities arise, very kind of holy moments can arise when you have a system like this missional space of sending those to serve. A lot of new opportunities arise and matches that you maybe wouldn't have thought originally, because all those who are a part of the process know, because of the relationships, what church is, what the mission of the local spaces might need. And so I've been grateful for the process. I think it's been a good thing, and it's also a very nuanced thing as well. But I think especially naming for the Methodist Church the importance of it's not just about the pastors or the bishops or those maybe in a centralized space that would seem like they have more authority or power, but it's about the laity too, where we are all as Methodists sent to serve. And I think that's important, that emphasis that one's not higher or more important than the other, but we can't be living into our mission without all of us being sent to serve. And so that's been important to see. One thing I wanted to lift up, and just simply to add in case y'all didn't know or not, but the United Methodist Church is a global church, and that's another kind of unique part of the Methodist Church is when we're making decisions at that legislative level, and when the executive level is making decisions, judicial, all of those spaces are global spaces. And so there are conferences in Africa, in the Philippines, in Europe, and so it's important to know that when we're making those decisions in a kind of all of those choices are global in nature, and I think that can offer incredible opportunities, and we'll talk about next week also how that has made kind of some decisions more challenging. So it's an important part of who we are as Methodists. So,
and the only two global expressions of the church in Christianity are the Roman Catholic Church and the United Methodist Church. We're the only two that are global in nature.
yeah.
Welcome to the Acts of the Apostles 2020. We'll talk about this next Tuesday.